My name is Juliette Langford. I'm 26 years old, and for most of my life I believed I was part of one of the most powerful, untouchable families in New England. We had money, prestige, a mansion older than the country itself. My mother Evelyn and father Charles Langford were practically royalty in Connecticut high society. Galas, charity boards, private planes, it was all I'd ever known. But behind the glittering facade was a truth no one wanted to admit. I was never really part of the family, not the way my sister Camilla was. Camilla, 3 years older than me, was the golden child. Everyone said so. She's delicate, my mother would murmur when she broke down over minor things. She needs extra support. And despite my perfect grades, my respectful silence, my eagerness to please was always the afterthought. The accessory daughter. When Camilla got a car for her sweet 16, I got a hand-me-down sweater. When she forgot to register for the SAT, my parents paid someone to fix it. When I was accepted into Princeton on a full scholarship, they barely looked up from their cocktails. But the real betrayal didn't come until after my grandfather Henry Langford, the only person who truly saw me, died. He was the one who raised me, not my parents. While my mother polished her image and my father micromanaged a crumbling investment firm, it was grandfather Henry who taught me how to read stock tickers, navigate by the stars, and how to stand tall in a world designed to make women like me feel small. Legacy, he used to say, isn't money. It's what you build and who you become. He died 6 months ago. The funeral was a performance. Camilla cried into a lace handkerchief, my mother wore black Chanel like it was Fashion Week, and my father made jokes with politicians in the front row. I stood in silence beside the casket, clutching the last letter he wrote me, unsigned, unreadable, water-stained from my tears. But the real storm came the week after, when the will was read. Henry Langford, the architect of our family fortune, had left me everything. Not just a portion, not a few tokens, but everything. The estate, the controlling interest in Langford Capital, the antique yacht he and I spent every summer restoring, all of it. Camilla was left a modest trust fund. My parents barely anything at all. The lawyer, Mr. Delaney, read the document in his usual bored tone, but the moment he reached the part about the inheritance, the room went silent. My mother turned to stone. My father looked like someone had slapped him. Camilla's face collapsed into confused fury. "This must be a mistake," my mother whispered, lips tight. "A typo, surely," my father added. Camilla stood up. "She must have manipulated him. This is a joke, right?" It wasn't a joke. It was the first time in my life I felt seen. And it was the last time I ever felt safe in that house. Because what followed wasn't just disbelief. It wasn't disappointment or hurt. It was war. A week later, I was physically dragged from the Langford estate by my father's own hand. My suitcase was hurled onto the driveway. The rain soaked through my clothes, my belongings, my dignity. And as I stared at the house I'd grown up in, locked, shuttered, silent, I remembered my grandfather's last words to me. "If they turn on you, look deeper. Not all treasures are kept in plain sight." What I didn't know then was that he had prepared for everything. And I wasn't done fighting, not by a long shot. If you've ever been cast aside by your own family or robbed of what's rightfully yours, stay with me. Because this story doesn't end in the rain. It starts there. I spent that night huddled in the back seat of my car, a silver Toyota Corolla I'd bought with internship money, because unlike Camilla, I was never gifted luxury. My hands trembled as I held my grandfather's old leather journal to my chest, the one thing they didn't take from me when they dragged me out like a criminal. That house, that life, everything was gone, in a blink. I didn't cry. Not yet. Not because I was strong, but because the betrayal hadn't sunk in. My scalp still throbbed from where my father had gripped my hair. My cheek was bruised. My pride was shattered. But something stronger burned underneath the shock. Anger, not just at them, at myself, for believing even for a moment that blood guaranteed loyalty. At 8 a.m., I drove to the only person I could still trust, Aria Matthews, my college roommate, and the closest thing I had to a sister. She lived in a one-bedroom apartment above a bookstore she helped run downtown. When she opened the door and saw me soaked, bruised suitcase in hand, her face crumpled in horror. "Oh my God, Jules, what happened?" "They kicked me out," I whispered, my voice barely there. "They took everything." She didn't hesitate. She pulled me into a hug so tight I finally sobbed. That day, Aria made tea, gave me clean clothes, and let me curl up on her couch like a child. I told her everything, the will, the confrontation, the bruises, The silence from staff who once called me Miss Juliette with affection and now wouldn't even meet my eyes. When I finished, she was silent for a long time. Then she said, "You need a lawyer, a real one, not someone from your family's network." She was right. By the end of that week, I had found Liam Rhodes, a sharp-tongued estate litigation expert with a background in corporate defense. He wasn't charming, but he was ruthless, and that's what I needed. "They're trying to freeze your inheritance," he said, flipping through the documents I'd saved on my flash drive. "They've already petitioned the probate court for a temporary injunction. Their claim that your grandfather was not of sound mind." I felt sick. He was sharper than anyone I know, even in hospice. He made me run financial simulations the week before he passed. He knew what he was doing. "I believe you," Liam said. "But this isn't about truth. It's about narrative. They have money, connections. They'll hire doctors to say what they want, and judges are people too. They get influenced." "What do I do?" He looked me dead in the eyes. "You fight back. But we need leverage. Documents, testimony, anything that proves your grandfather's intent and clarity." I reached into my bag and handed him the journal. "This was his," I said. "He told me to keep it safe." Inside were pages of notes, personal reflections, hand-drawn charts, meeting records, and at the very back, a sealed envelope with my name on it. I hadn't opened it until now. Liam handed me a letter opener. With trembling hands, I slit the top and pulled out a short note written in my grandfather's clean, deliberate handwriting. "Juliette, if you're reading this, then I'm no longer there to shield you. But I've laid breadcrumbs. The people who want to take what's yours may have power, but you have truth. Find the watch. Inside you'll find what they can't erase. I trust you." "Ah." "The watch," Liam asked, eyebrows lifting. I knew exactly what he meant. My grandfather's pocket watch, an antique gold piece he always carried engraved with our family crest, had been on his nightstand the last time I saw him. They took it. They took everything. But not before I packed a few sentimental things into my emergency suitcase. I lunged for the duffel in Arya's living room and unzipped it, rifling through scarves, books, and notebooks until I found it, the heavy, time-worn pocket watch. Still warm from the sun that day. Still ticking. I turned it over in my palm, running my finger along the grooves, and then I felt it. A small latch. I clicked it. The back popped open, revealing a tiny USB drive tucked inside the watch's hidden compartment. Liam's eyes widened. "You've got to be kidding me." "No," I whispered, breath catching. "I think I've got them." If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever had to fight against a system rigged to destroy you, then keep watching. Because what came next, that was only the beginning. Liam plugged the tiny USB into his laptop, his expression shifting from skepticism to awe within seconds. "Your grandfather wasn't just smart," he murmured, scrolling. "He was 10 moves ahead." Inside the drive were dozens of files, PDFs, audio clips, and video recordings, all organized in cleanly labeled folders. At the top was a document titled "Contingency Plan in the Event of Family Interference." "Okay, Henry," Liam muttered. "What did you leave us?" I leaned over his shoulder, heart pounding as he opened the first file. It was a video, a recording of my grandfather sitting in his favorite leather chair, the one in his study beneath the oil painting of my grandmother. "Juliette." He began, his voice calm, gravelly, but clear. "If you're seeing this, I'm gone. But I need you to know I saw this coming. I know your parents. I know Camilla. I've spent years watching them manipulate, coerce, and scheme. I've made arrangements." I felt my throat close. I hadn't heard his voice in weeks. Now it was like he was back alive, speaking directly to me. "This drive contains medical evaluations from my doctors confirming I was of sound mind during every revision of my will. I also included copies of my financial decisions and video logs of our business meetings, everything you'll need to prove my intentions." He paused, then added with a half smile, "I've even included recordings of your mother and father arguing over how to influence me. Camilla, too, just in case they get bold." Liam sat back. "Holy, this is a bombshell." There was more, so much more. I clicked through the folders myself, my fingers trembling. Folder 1, mental fitness reports from Dr. May, his longtime physician, showing he passed cognitive testing within 2 weeks of signing the will. Folder 2, legacy files, video clips of me and him discussing the company estate and future plans. In one, he even says Juliette will lead Langford Capital or the company dies. That's my final word. Folder 3, insurance accounts, encrypted documents listing offshore accounts, funds untouched by the estate. Nearly $2 million set aside for emergencies. And then the most important, Folder 4, Richard Emerson, private contact, Who's Richard Emerson? Liam asked. I recognized the name. Grandpa mentioned him once, an old friend, former business partner, someone he said knew where the bodies were buried, whatever that meant. There was an address in rural Vermont, a phone number, and a note. If they force you out, go to Richard. He knows what to do. I looked up at Liam, the gravity of it all sinking in. They're not just trying to steal money. They're trying to erase me. He nodded. Then let's make sure they can't. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on Arya's couch, the drive clutched in my hand, replaying my grandfather's video over and over. Every word felt like armor, every second like a weapon. I had what I needed, but I had to move carefully. They were watching. The next morning, I packed what little I had left, hugged Arya like it might be the last time, and drove north toward Vermont. My father had stripped me of my name, my status, my home, but he didn't take my grandfather's love, or his plan. As the miles rolled by and the Connecticut mansions faded behind me, I knew the real fight was just beginning, and this time I wasn't alone. If you've ever been pushed out of your own life by people who said they loved you, keep watching. Because what happens next, they never saw it coming. The drive to Vermont felt like entering another world. Gone were the manicured hedges, the marble pillars, the snide glances from neighbors who'd always smiled through their teeth. Now it was pine trees and winding roads, fog settling low over sleepy valleys. It smelled like wood smoke and damp leaves like truth. I found the address from the USB outside a town called Millersbrook, tucked behind an old wooden fence half covered in ivy. A faded sign read, Emerson and Coerce Private Trusts, Est 1973. It didn't look like much. Just a colonial house converted into an office, but something about it felt solid, safe. I parked, double-checked the folder, and knocked on the heavy oak door. Seconds later, it creaked open to reveal a man in his late 60s. He had weathered skin-gray hair tied back in a low ponytail and sharp blue eyes that studied me like I was a puzzle he already knew the answer to. You're Henry's girl, he said without question. I nodded. Juliette Langford. He opened the door wider. Come in, you're late. Henry said you'd show up the day after the storm. I blinked. What storm? He gave a sad smile, the kind where families eat their own. Inside the place was cozy and chaotic books stacked in corners, antique clocks ticking out of sync, and the faint smell of cinnamon tea. He motioned for me to sit across from a cluttered desk. Your grandfather trusted 3 people in his life, Richard said, settling in. Your grandmother, me, and you. He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick black binder labeled L.E.O. Langford Emergency Operations. He didn't just anticipate betrayal, Richard said, flipping it open. He prepared for it. Over the next hour, Richard walked me through a plan so intricate it could have been written for a spy novel. My grandfather had created secret trusts, shell companies, exit strategies. Everything was legal documented and completely separate from the will being contested. There was even a private LLC that owned a stake in Langford Capital, an ownership that wasn't disclosed in the public filings because it had been quietly reassigned to me years ago. Your parents think they cut you off, Richard said. They're about to learn they've been building on sand. He also explained something else, the ethics clause. Apparently, my grandfather had altered the Langford Capital bylaws 5 years before his death. It required any major leadership change, like removing or replacing the heir, to be approved by an ethics committee. That committee made up of 5 retired executives Grandpa personally appointed, none of whom liked my parents. You have leverage, Richard said, closing the binder. Now you need strategy. I stayed with Richard that night in the guest room upstairs. It wasn't luxurious. The bed creaked, the walls were thin, and the radiator hissed like it had secrets. But for the first time in weeks, I slept deeply. In the morning, I called Liam and brought him up to speed. He was floored. We've got a real shot, he said. With Richard's documentation and the drive's contents, we can hit them on multiple fronts, probate, corporate, and criminal. But we need more, I said. Testimony, witnesses, paper trails. Liam agreed. Start with the staff. Someone must have seen or heard something. I did exactly that. From Richard's study, we built a war room. I reached out to Nora, my grandfather's longtime nurse, and Jameson, the groundskeeper who'd served our family for 2 decades. Nora was hesitant. I don't want to get involved, she said. They're powerful. But when I played her the video of my grandfather, the one where he said he feared they might try to erase his intentions, she cried. He told me the same, she said softly. I'll testify. Jameson, too, agreed to help. Your parents always treated me like furniture, he said. But your grandfather? He treated me like a man. I owe him that. Piece by piece, the cracks began to show. Meanwhile, back in Connecticut, Camilla was doing interviews with lifestyle magazines about her grief, and my parents were scrambling to reassure Langford Capital investors that all was well. But I knew the truth. Nothing was well. They'd kicked me out thinking I was helpless. They didn't know I had a map, and I was following every step of it. If you've ever been left behind told you were weak, forgettable, replaceable, just wait. Because in the next chapter I begin to take back everything they tried to steal. The next 2 weeks were a blur of strategy, secrecy, and slowly unraveling lies. Richard and I worked around the clock in his dusty study, piecing together the full picture of what my parents had done, and more importantly, how they had done it. Liam, my lawyer, coordinated everything from his downtown office. "We can't go public yet," he warned. "Not until we have airtight evidence. Once we strike, it has to be devastating." So that's what we built, devastation. We started by following the money. Richard had always suspected my parents were mismanaging Langford Capital funds, and he was right. Through one of the hidden LLCs, we found transaction records, millions quietly siphoned into offshore accounts right after my grandfather's diagnosis. We traced unauthorized payments, inflated consulting fees, and loans using company assets as collateral. Then came the forgery. Camilla had claimed in public interviews that my grandfather was mentally confused at the end. She even referenced a letter he supposedly wrote doubting the fairness of his final will. That letter had been presented to the probate court to freeze the estate. But we found metadata showing it had been created 2 weeks after his death on a laptop belonging to Gregory Price, the family lawyer. I felt sick when I saw it. Gregory had known me since I was a child. He used to sneak me butterscotch candies during meetings. Now he was committing fraud to destroy me. "You think you know people?" I muttered. "No," Liam said coldly. "You know who they are when power's on the line, and right now you're standing between them and everything." That's when I made a decision. If I was going to win this, I couldn't just defend myself. I had to go on the attack. So I hired someone my family would never see coming. His name was Milo Crane, a private investigator with a reputation for getting the kind of intel that doesn't show up in court documents. He had the look of someone who hadn't slept properly in years, but within 5 days, he delivered something explosive. Camilla had gambling debts. Not small ones, massive. Over $400,000 across several casinos, some of which were linked to underground lenders with criminal ties. The kicker. The debts had all mysteriously vanished the same week I was dragged from the estate. And guess who made the payments? A wire transfer from Langford Capital's emergency fund signed by my mother. They were using company money to cover Camilla's secrets. And lying to shareholders while doing it. "This isn't just family betrayal," Liam said, staring at the printout. "This is corporate fraud, embezzlement, and possibly conspiracy." The implications were staggering. If we could prove it all, and we were close, we could not only win the inheritance battle, we could destroy their reputations. And yet something in me hesitated. I wasn't sure if it was guilt, or trauma, or the echo of every childhood moment I'd begged for their approval. But then I remembered the bruises, the silence, the front door slamming in my face while I stood soaked and shaking in the rain. They didn't hesitate. Why should I? That night, I sent Camilla a text for the first time in months. "Juliette, I know about the debts and the wire transfers. I know everything. If you want to talk, you have one chance. One. Tomorrow. Noon. You choose the place." She replied 10 minutes later. "Camilla, I'll meet you at St. Eda's Park, the bridge. St. Eda's. The same place we used to play as kids. The same wooden bridge where she pushed me into the creek when I was 10 and swore it was an accident." I didn't expect an apology. But what she said there would shake me more than I was ready for. Because as twisted as I thought this story already was, Camilla revealed something worse. A secret even my grandfather didn't know. If you've ever thought your family's betrayal couldn't cut any deeper, just wait. The knife twists next. I arrived early at St. Eda's Park. It looked the same as it had years ago, oak trees casting long shadows across the grass, the shallow creek babbling beneath the wooden bridge. A peaceful place. But my stomach churned with tension. This was the last place I'd ever imagined facing Camilla again. She arrived 5 minutes late, wearing oversized sunglasses and a tailored trench coat that looked like it was trying to hold her together. Her heels clicked across the bridge's weathered planks until she stood just a few feet from me. "You look different," she said, trying for casual. "You look exactly the same," I replied, "except more nervous." She gave a tight smile and pulled off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red, either from crying or exhaustion. Maybe both. "Why now?" I asked. "Why meet me at all?" "Because you're winning," she said bluntly. "And because I'm tired of pretending I'm not drowning." She leaned on the railing and stared down at the water. You know about the gambling, she said. I figured that much when Milo Crane started asking questions. I didn't confirm or deny. Let her sweat. I never meant for it to go this far, she continued. At first it was just poker, a way to rebel, I guess. Then the stakes got higher, the losses too, and I started borrowing. She turned to face me fully. Mom and Dad knew, she said quietly. They found out 2 years ago. That's when everything changed. Changed how I asked. Camilla's voice shook. They told me I could either let them fix it or lose everything. They made me sign over power of attorney for my accounts, gave me a monthly allowance, and said if I didn't cooperate, they'd cut me off. My pulse thudded. They used you, I said. No, Camilla whispered. They used both of us. She took a deep breath. Juliette, the forged letter. The one saying Grandpa doubted you, I didn't just know about it. I helped write it. I flinched. I didn't want to, she said quickly. They threatened to expose the debts. Said I'd go to jail. Said the Langford name couldn't survive another scandal. And you believed them, I hissed. She nodded, ashamed. I let them convince me you were dangerous, that Grandpa was manipulated, that you weren't fit to run the company. I stared at her. Even though you knew he spent his last months preparing me, Camilla looked like she might cry. I was jealous. Still am, I think. You were everything I wasn't resilient, sharp, loved by him. I thought if I helped them stop you, maybe I'd finally be enough. I shook my head, biting back 1,000 bitter words. Then why meet now, I asked. Why tell me all of this? Because I'm done lying, she said. And because I found something. She reached into her coat and pulled out a flash drive. Dad made Gregory destroy the original estate backup, but Gregory kept a copy insurance in case things turned on him. I swiped it from his briefcase last week. I took it with trembling hands. What's on it? Correspondence, she said. Emails, strategy memos, records showing exactly how they plan to cut you out. Gregory coached them through everything. There's even a draft of a second forged will. I stared at her. Why give it to me now? Camilla looked down. Because I'm scared. Because I don't want to be the villain anymore. And because part of me still remembers when we were sisters. I pocketed the flash drive. I won't forgive you, I said. She nodded. I don't expect you to. And I'm not protecting you when this goes public. I know, she whispered. But I will remember this, I added. She looked up, her eyes hopeful for a split second. Then maybe it's not too late. As she turned and walked away, I stood alone on the bridge with more than just evidence I had the truth. Proof they never thought I'd find. And one more weapon in a war they were about to lose. Because what Camilla handed me, it would unravel everything. If you've ever wished for justice so badly it felt like breathing, stay with me. The reckoning is about to begin. By the time I returned to Richard's house, I felt like I was carrying dynamite in my coat pocket. I handed the flash drive to Liam, who immediately uploaded it to a secure server. He scanned through the folders, silently growing more still with every new file. Jesus, he finally whispered. This isn't just proof of forgery. This is a playbook. The files were damning. Emails between Gregory Price and my father Charles, discussing how to make the new will stick without legal blowback. A Word document titled Alternative Will Draft 3.docx timestamped after my grandfather's death. Payment records showing Gregory received $150,000 days before filing the challenge against the original will. Detailed notes on how to discredit me, suggesting a psychiatric evaluation, a leak to the press, even a smear campaign on social media. All of it signed, dated, traceable. Camilla had handed me the nuclear button. Liam leaned back, looking at me differently now. Not as some wide-eyed heiress clinging to scraps of power, but as a general preparing to end a war. This is enough to blow it all open, he said. And if we time this right, we can get the probate judge, the ethics committee, and the state bar involved simultaneously. Good, I said, voice steely. I want them to know what it feels like to be surrounded. Richard entered the room just as Liam was preparing the case packet. He handed me a glass of scotch, no words needed. We had waited long enough. It was time. 3 days later, we made our move. Step 1. Liam filed a comprehensive motion with the probate court, including every document, email, and signature from the flash drive. Attached was my grandfather's original video testimony, his voice unshakable, declaring me as his heir and condemning any attempt to reverse that. Step 2. Richard contacted the Langford Capital Ethics Committee. Using the video evidence and financial records of my parents' unauthorized payments, we demanded an emergency hearing to challenge their legitimacy as controlling shareholders. Step 3. Liam's firm submitted a formal complaint to the State Bar Association detailing Gregory Price's role in the forged will and illegal filings. Step 4. We tipped off two major business journalists, anonymously supplying them with just enough verified information to light the fuse. The story dropped like a bomb. Langford legacy and question internal scheme to rewrite 10 Mellors will exposed. Within hours, our phones lit up. Investors panicked. Board members resigned. Camilla's name trended for all the wrong reasons. My parents silent. Until that night. A private number called my phone. I let it ring out. Then came a text from my mother. We need to talk. You don't know the whole story. A second later, another text, this time from my father. Don't make this uglier than it already is. You're destroying the family name. I laughed out loud. I wasn't destroying the family name. I was saving what little was left. That night, I stood in the guest room at Richard's place, staring out the window, scotch in hand. The trees were bare. The wind howled. But for the first time, I felt steady. I was no longer the forgotten daughter, the afterthought, the piece they thought they could discard. I was the storm. If you've ever reached the point where you stopped begging for fairness and started demanding truth, then you understand exactly where I was. And you'll understand what happens next, because they didn't go down without one last desperate move. 3 days after the scandal broke, I received a court summons. My parents were counterattacking with a new accusation that I had manipulated my grandfather during his illness, that I was mentally unstable, that I had fabricated documents and stolen company secrets. It was absurd, but it was intentional. They wanted to cast doubt, stall the process, buy time, maybe even force a settlement through public pressure. This isn't about winning in court, Liam said, pacing in his office. They're trying to muddy the water, to make you look like just another rich kid fighting over crumbs. They dragged me by my hair, I said deadpan. I remember the crumbs. He stopped pacing. We're going to shut them down, all of them. But you need to be ready for the courtroom. I've been ready since the driveway. The hearing was set for Monday, but on Friday afternoon something strange happened. Camilla showed up at Richard's door, unannounced. Her hair was tied back, no makeup, eyes bloodshot. In her hand, a manila folder. I'm not here to beg, she said. I'm here because you need this. She sat at the kitchen table and slid the folder toward me. Inside were photos, scanned copies of old letters, but not from her. From my grandfather. Letters he'd written to me but never sent. He gave them to Mom to mail, Camilla said. She didn't. She hid them. The letters were from the months just before his death, filled with warmth, warnings, and one terrifying line. If you're ever in danger, go to Richard. Trust no one else, not even Gregory. I fear Evelyn has plans, and Charles has no spine to stop her. I looked up from the pages, shaking. Why now? Why bring this now? Camilla shrugged, voice hollow. Because they're planning something worse. I overheard them last night. They want to fabricate psychiatric records. Try to get a conservatorship placed on you. I blinked. What? They've already paid 2 doctors to write evaluations, she said. And they're trying to bribe Peterson to say you've had outbursts. Peterson the butler? She nodded. They're desperate, Juliette. You need to hit harder than ever. I handed the folder to Liam, who had just walked in. He scanned it, then looked at Camilla. If you're lying and we bring this to court... She's not, I interrupted. Not this time. Camilla met my eyes. They're going to try to take you down with everything they have, but I don't want to go down with them. Monday courthouse? The air crackled with tension. My parents arrived with an army of lawyers in tailored suits. My mother looked like she was attending a red carpet, not a court proceeding. My father adjusted his cufflinks like they were armor. Camilla sat on my side, not close but present. Then Judge Remington entered, stern, unflinching. The hearing began with their side throwing the kitchen sink. A psychiatrist who'd never met me claiming I displayed erratic and narcissistic behaviors. A distorted timeline of my grandfather's illness. Claims that I was estranged and only reappeared when the inheritance was at stake. Then it was our turn. Liam moved like a scalpel. He presented the original will, the video testimony, the financial documents, the metadata proof of forgery, and now, thanks to Camilla, the unsent letters. Then came the trump card. A video recording of Gregory Price secretly obtained by Milo, in which he admitted being pushed into helping Evelyn and Charles fabricate the second will draft. Gasps filled the courtroom. Even the judge looked shaken. What I see, Judge Remington said slowly, is a coordinated effort to discredit and dispossess the rightful heir. Miss Langford, your grandfather's intent was crystal clear. He turned to my parents. As for Mr. and Mrs. Langford, expect further investigation. The allegations of fraud, document tampering, and coercion are serious. This court will issue a ruling on your liability within the month. Then he looked at me. And Miss Langford, You are hereby reinstated as the sole heir and legal owner of the Langford estate and controlling shareholder of Langford Capital. My mother didn't cry. She simply stood too proud to show defeat. My father muttered something under his breath, probably a threat. But I didn't hear it, because I was already walking out of that courtroom finally free. And I wasn't walking alone. Camilla trailed behind me, quiet, unsure. You're not off the hook, I told her, but thank you for the folder. She nodded. I didn't do it for them. I did it for Grandpa, and maybe a little for us. Outside reporters swarmed, cameras flashed, questions flew. But I didn't speak. Not yet. Because the real statement was still coming. If you've ever had to stand alone in front of the people who tried to destroy you and still walk out stronger, you know what this moment feels like. And trust me, it's just the beginning of the rebuild. The courtroom victory changed everything. Within hours of the ruling news outlets ran headlines like wildfire. Langford heiress vindicated in explosive inheritance. Battle forgery. Fraud and family betrayal inside the collapse of a high society empire. Juliette Langford. From outcast to owner. Langford Capital stock plummeted briefly as the scandal unraveled, but then something unexpected happened. It stabilized. Investors, once skeptical, now saw something different me. The woman who had gone through hell uncovered the truth and emerged stronger, and they started believing in the legacy my grandfather had always believed I could carry. But the estate, that was another matter entirely. When I returned to the mansion 2 weeks later, my mansion now, it didn't feel triumphant. It felt hollow. Empty rooms still smelled like perfume that wasn't mine. My childhood bedroom had been stripped bare. My grandfather's study, once warm and cluttered with books, had been cleaned out by my father before I was kicked out. I stood in the grand foyer looking around the house I had once called home and whispered, "We're back, Grandpa, just like you wanted." But inside I felt disconnected. I didn't want the echoes. I wanted to build something. So I made a decision I would honor his legacy by reshaping it. Step 1. The Langford Foundation. I established a nonprofit in my grandfather's name, dedicated to ethical leadership, business education, and providing scholarships to students from underprivileged communities who showed entrepreneurial promise. He used to say the best investment isn't in the stock market, it's in people with potential. Now I was investing in them. Step 2. Rebuilding the company. With Richard's help and the ethics committee now fully backing me, we conducted a forensic audit of Langford Capital. We cleaned House-terminated board members who had enabled the fraud-restructured toxic divisions and launched transparency initiatives. I wasn't just the face of the company now. I was its heart. Step 3. Selling the estate. I held one last dinner there, a quiet evening with Richard, Aria, Liam, and Camilla, yes, Camilla, before putting the property on the market. I donated 30% of the proceeds to charities supporting domestic abuse survivors and young women in business. 'Cause legacy isn't marble and gold. It's what you do with pain. Camilla, for her part, had started therapy. She'd cut ties with our parents, entirely moved into a modest apartment, and asked to volunteer at the foundation. "I'm not ready to be your sister again," I told her. "I'm not asking to be," she replied. "Just let me earn your trust back, even if it takes years." That honesty, it was a start. As for my parents, Gregory Price was officially disbarred. Criminal charges were pending, and my mother and father, they vanished from the spotlight, holed up in a rental property in upstate New York. Occasionally, they'd send emails. "We miss you. We want to talk. You've proven your point." I didn't respond. Some relationships don't get repaired. Some doors stay closed. And that's not weakness. It's wisdom. 3 months later, something unexpected happened. At a corporate sustainability summit, I met Noah Reyes, a startup founder in clean tech who had no idea who I was when we first met. "You're Juliette Langford," he said after we exchanged cards. "I've read about you. The woman who took down her entire family with a flash drive." I laughed. That's one way to put it. We talked all night about business ethics, grief, resilience. He didn't care about the money. He cared about what I'd done with it. And for the first time in a long time, I let someone see the parts of me that weren't polished or poised or angry. Just real. Because underneath the courtroom victories, the headlines, and the mansion keys, I was still the girl my grandfather raised. The one who listened more than she spoke. The one who studied maps and stock charts and weathered storms. And now I was finally charting my own course. If you've ever had to tear down your past just to start over, know this. You are not alone. And the best chapters sometimes come after the war. Fall settled over New England like a soft exhale. The air grew crisp, the leaves turned amber, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I had space to breathe. I spent my mornings at the Langford Foundation offices downtown, working with young entrepreneurs from underserved communities. We offered grants, mentorship, and business boot camps. We gave them what I was almost denied a chance to prove themselves. And in the evenings I wrote, not legal filings or board memos, but letters to my grandfather. I never mailed them, of course, but it helped. To put down what I couldn't always say aloud. To honor the man who had taught me how to tack against the wind. Then one morning in late October, I received a letter, a real one. Return address State Correctional Facility. It was from my mother. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Her handwriting was unchanged, elegant, controlled, but the tone foreign. Juliette, I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I won't pretend I did what I did for any noble reason. I was selfish, terrified of losing the life we'd built. I thought control meant protection. I thought silence was safety. But I was wrong. You've proven that in ways I never could. And though I can't undo what I did, I want you to know I see you now. Truly. And I'm sorry. She didn't ask for forgiveness. Just acknowledgement. I didn't respond, but I didn't throw it away either. I tucked it between the pages of my grandfather's journal. Later that week, I returned to the cemetery for the first time in months. The Langford plot was quiet, the trees overhead swaying like old whispers. I brought the pocket watch polished and ticking again and placed it at the base of the stone. The engraving still read, integrity above all. I knelt beside it and whispered, we made it, Grandpa. And I didn't just get the company back. I got myself back. Behind me, footsteps crunched on the gravel path. I turned. It was Camilla. I didn't know you'd be here, she said softly. I come when I need to remember who I am, I replied. She looked at the grave, then back at me. Do you think he'd be proud of us? I paused. Of me, yes. Of you, maybe someday. She nodded. She didn't argue, just sat beside me on the bench in silence. And for a long while we just sat. Weeks passed. I moved into a new place, a modest brownstone in Boston. The estate had sold quickly, and I donated another quarter of the proceeds to the foundation. My new home didn't echo. It felt lived in, warm, mine. Noah came over, often bringing books, new wine he wanted me to try, and ideas for eco-startups. We weren't labeling things yet, but what we were building, it felt real, healthy, uncomplicated. And one night, while cooking dinner together, he asked, if you could say one thing to your younger self, what would it be? I didn't hesitate. That your worth doesn't come from their love, or lack of it. He looked at me for a moment, then nodded. The holidays came, and for the first time in years, I wasn't trying to force anyone to include me. I celebrated with chosen family Aria, Richard, Camilla, yes again, and a few foundation scholars who had nowhere else to go. There was no grand staircase, no champagne fountains, just laughter, warmth, and a table full of second chances. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was trying to earn my place. I belonged. If you've ever clawed your way back from heartbreak, from betrayal, from a life you didn't choose, then you understand this chapter. Because the real miracle isn't just surviving the storm. It's learning how to live in the sunlight again. By January, the legal dust had settled. My parents had accepted a plea deal, limited financial restitution, community service, and the permanent loss of any claim to Langford assets. Gregory Price, the disgraced lawyer who tried to rewrite my future, was officially disbarred and facing civil litigation from multiple clients. The media circus began to die down. I was no longer the girl who took down her family. Now I was simply Juliette Langford, CEO of Langford Capital, founder of the Langford Foundation, and someone who had survived the worst parts of her bloodline. But peace, it came with a strange weight. Because after the battles are over, the world expects you to just move on. But how do you move on from people who raised you to doubt yourself? How do you build something beautiful from the pieces of yourself they broke? Dr. Eleanor West, my therapist, and the best gift I gave myself that year, asked me that exact question. And for once, I didn't have an answer. I don't know who I am when I'm not fighting, I admitted in session. That's okay, she said. Most people don't. The goal isn't to never be angry again, Juliette. It's to not be ruled by what made you angry. So I did the one thing I hadn't allowed myself to do since this all began. I stopped. I let the board handle the day-to-day. I scaled back meetings. I handed more responsibilities to the leadership team I'd built. And I took a month to just exist. I traveled alone, no security, no agenda. I visited the marina where my grandfather first taught me to sail. I walked the Boston Harbor with nothing but a notebook and an old scarf of his wrapped around my neck. And slowly I remembered who I was before all the noise. Not the heir, not the outcast, not the strategist, just me. Juliette who read biographies in coffee shops. Juliette who sketched in the margins of meeting notes. Juliette, who still kept her grandfather's compass in her purse, not because she needed direction, but because it reminded her that she could always find it. When I returned, I felt different, lighter, but grounded. That's when I made a new kind of list, not of enemies or legal strategies, but of what I wanted. To mentor young women starting their careers, to fund community libraries in underserved towns, to grow Langford Capital into an ethical business empire, to travel with someone I love not as an escape, but as a celebration, to never ever again beg for belonging. Noah and I sat under the stars on his rooftop the night I told him about the list. He listened quietly, then said, "You know what that sounds like?" "What?" "A legacy." One cold February morning, I received an unexpected visitor. Peterson, the butler who had watched me get dragged down the stairs. The man who had stayed silent, then later testified on my behalf. "I wanted to say thank you," he said, his voice gravelly, "for not holding it against me, for understanding why I didn't intervene sooner." I studied him. "You were afraid." He nodded. "Yes, but I shouldn't have been. I should have protected you." "You're not the only one who froze," I said quietly. "We all did until we couldn't anymore." He handed me a small box. Inside was my grandfather's cufflinks at the one I'd thought my father pawned. "I kept these," Peterson said. "I always believed you'd come back." I held them to my chest and whispered, "Thank you." And I meant it for everything, even the silence. Because sometimes silence turns into courage, and sometimes the people who failed you are the ones who prove you're finally safe. If you've ever looked around at the life you fought to rebuild and thought, now what this chapter is for you. Because healing doesn't always look like a movie ending. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's awkward, sometimes it's lonely, but it's yours. And that makes it worth everything. 1 year? That's how long it had been since I stood in the rain, bruised and shaking, watching the house I grew up in shut its doors on me. Now I stood at the podium of the Langford Foundation's first annual gala, looking out at a room full of entrepreneurs, activists, students, and survivors. People who, like me, had been told they weren't enough, only to rise, rebuild, and reclaim. I was no longer the girl begging for a seat at someone else's table. I was building the table. The lights dimmed as a short film played a tribute to my grandfather, filled with photos, archived audio, and even a clip from his final video message. "If you're watching this," he had said, "then my Juliette has done what I always knew she would." She stood up. She held the line. She led not because she wanted power, but because she understood responsibility. And for that, I am proud beyond measure. The room erupted in applause, but I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't moved, but because I knew now he saw me, always had. And now the world did too. The next morning I returned to the marina one last time, not alone. Noah stood beside me, arm around my waist, as I scattered a small pouch of my grandfather's ashes into the bay, the same water where he taught me to sail, to think, to lead. As the wind carried them away, I whispered, "We did it, you and me." Noah squeezed my hand. "What now, Captain?" I smiled. "Now I live, not to prove a point, not to settle a score, not to reclaim what was taken, but to build something that can't be stolen." Months later, I walked into a lecture hall at a women's university to give a talk on resilience and legacy. Afterward, a young woman approached me, nervous, clinging to a leather notebook. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, "but how did you do it? How did you keep going when everyone turned on you?" I looked at her. Really looked. She was me, just a few years earlier, terrified, unsure, burning with quiet potential. I took her hand. "I remembered who I was," I said, "even when they tried to make me forget. And when that didn't work, I built a life where no one could ever erase me again." She nodded, tears in her eyes. And just like that, the legacy continued. So here's what I've learned. Family isn't defined by blood, but by respect and safety. Power without integrity is just a trap disguised as a throne. And when they try to write you out of the story, write yourself back in. Because the real inheritance, it's not money, it's self-worth. It's the ability to walk through fire and emerge with your soul intact. It's the courage to keep going even when no one's clapping. And it's the moment you realize you don't need anyone's permission to belong to yourself. If you've ever fought to reclaim your place in the world, if you've ever been dragged out, locked out, or left behind, then this was your story too. And if it moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of your own strength, leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Share your story. I read everyone. Like if you've ever had to fight for yourself. And subscribe, because this channel is where healing begins. Because sometimes the truest legacy we carry is the one we carve ourselves. Thank you for listening. Juliette.